Hello, everybody. We are back, and I would like to introduce you to Jamie Corley. And she's going to be talking to you today about websites, about all the various terminology, what it means. A lot of people will turn around and say, what's the difference between a URL and a domain name or a this and that, and how are they related to each other, and what's a web host? Well, all of those are different things and a lot more to it. So she's going to be giving you the insights that you need for that, particularly very important if you want to go into being a professional writer element of your marketing. So I would like to mention that, again, she is a co-owner of SouthWest Cyberport, which is what they call a domain host. And they have been hosting the SouthWest Writers website now since we've had one. They are local here in Albuquerque, so if you have a problem, you can always walk in the door and demand to talk to somebody, although they do like you to call in advance since COVID started, just so they know you're coming. But you call them up and, you get a person that's here that speaks very intelligible English. Sometimes when you're going with one of these big national firms, you call and you have a hard time and you're wanting to know what they're saying and they're wanting to know what you're saying, but the communication's not always right. Well, I like being able to talk to someone who knows what I'm saying. And so I find that a really great element of having a local hosting service here instead of going with some of the big national ones. Totally reasonable prices. I use them. I manage 6 websites myself. So I love just being able to call them and say, here is who I am. And, it's about this website and they know me, they're like, oh yeah, okay. I see your name right here. No problem. What can I do for you? They always, with your website, they also give you a free email so that you can have a separate one that's separate from your personal email. So you don't get them all mixed up, because sometimes you like to keep your professional and your personal life separate. But she's going to tell you lots and lots and lots about all of this and more. And by the way, they do give classes over there for people at her. Actually, you call them, what is it you call those?
We do work-alongs, and we also do classes sometimes. The work-along is where if you're working on a WordPress website, you can come and hang out in a room with a bunch of other people who are also working on WordPress websites. A couple of us have been doing it for many years, and we're there to answer questions. So if anything's going wrong, you can come get some advice, and you can also get a chance to see what other people are doing in the world of website building.
Sweet. So without further ado, Jamie Corley.
Hi. Well, thank you all for showing up. This is awesome. I hope you all will bear with me. It's been since before the pandemic since I've done any public speaking. So here goes. We'll see how it goes. Today I want to talk about website building, why you might want a website, and what kinds of things you put in a website in general. So I guess the first thing that you have to ask yourself when you're getting ready to do a website is, why are you building this website? What is the point? Some people just like to experiment with websites, and that's perfectly fine, but most people actually have a goal to accomplish. And this might be selling a product. It might be trying to promote your company. It might be just talking about something that you want to educate the public about, or just having a conversation with your audience out there in the world. Once you have decided that you do want to do a website, the next question is, what pieces do you need to put together a website? You're going to need what's called a domain name. You're going to need domain name service, and you're going to need a web hosting server. And many times people have these things all kind of confused in their mind, but a domain name is the way that your brand is recognized on the internet, and it is mapped from that name to a specific web server where the files of your website might live. So a domain name can be something like mydomain.com or yourdomain.net or whatnot. Back in the good old days, there were only 3 types of domains: the .coms, the .nets, and the .orgs, and also some country domains, but those were the big 3: commercial, network infrastructure, and public nonprofit organizations. So these days, though, they've introduced a whole lot more TLDs, top level domains. You can have things like .blog and .photos and .lawyers, and there's just a whole slew of them out there that you're welcome to pick up if you want. People still tend to gravitate to the .coms, and as authors, probably the most natural domain name that you might want is yourname.com, because that's the thing that people are going to try first and foremost. So once you've got this domain name, once you've talked to a domain name registrar, you then need to get it registered into the domain system. And the domain system is a distributed system that's out internationally around the world. Starts with something called the root servers, and they know things about the top level domains. They know everything that's in .com or everything that's in .net, but they don't maybe know the specifics. They know how to get in touch with a local domain name that knows something about your specific domain, and from that they can then tell where your specific web files are going to live. So you got to have a domain registered. You need to have somebody set up DNS service for you. Then you have to have a hosting company where all your files live for the website itself. These things can all be done at a single company. In fact, they often are. Web hosting companies often will bundle all this stuff together, but it isn't necessary to have them all bundled together. You can register a domain with one company, have DNS service with another, and have your web hosting someplace else. It's usually easier when you're getting started, just kind of to bundle them all in one place, but there are reasons why you might not necessarily want to do that. For example, if you have a hosting company that doesn't do email very well, and there are a few of them out there, unfortunately, you might want to have your email done someplace else. So once you have your hosting, your web hosting here and your email here, then the question is, who's actually doing the DNS? Well, it could be with your hosting company. It could be with your mail server company. It doesn't matter. As long as you know where it is, you're good to go. And as long as only one of them is doing it. Yeah.
SouthWest server point but does it all, right?
We do. Yeah, we do all of those things. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And most of the web hosting companies do all of those things. GoDaddy will set you up, and any of the major web hosting companies is capable of doing all this stuff. When you decide where it comes into play that you might have them split is when you decide you might want to move your website from one company to another company. Then the question is, do you leave your DNS with the original company or do you move it? And you can do either of those things, and don't let them talk you into something you don't want to do. So. Okay, so the next question about web hosting is, well, how do people find you on the internet? And you may think, well, they know my domain name, so they'll just come there. But in fact, more often than not, where people are going to find you is either from a search engine or from some kind of social media post, or they may have been at your website at one point in time and subscribed to your repetitive articles in the form of a blog. And so they'll get an email and then come back to your website. Or the best of all is kind of word of mouth, and that's a friend has told them about your website and sends them a link and sends you there. So there's lots of different ways of which you might wind up on somebody's website. So now we're going to talk a little bit about potential parts of a website. You're going to have your permanent content, and that's kind of the main structure of your website. If you're a business, that's going to be things like where you're located, what your hours are, maybe some bios of your staff, something like that, maybe a contact form, something like that. Ephemeral contact is your blog. And what that is it's event driven. It's basically anything that's going on in your world that you want to have a conversation with your audience about. But it's something that's happening now, and in a year that post probably isn't going to be of a whole lot of interest to anybody. So And it tends to be displayed kind of like a newspaper front page. You'll have part of an article, part of an article, part of an article, and then it'll send you deeper into the newspaper or deeper into the website for the full content. So that's called a blog. And that's your ephemeral content. You might also have a suite of tools on your website. Not everybody will, but sometimes this is really useful. If you have like a real estate website, you might have a tool on your website that is for listings, for multiple listings, so that people can look up things by different criteria, price, size, part of town, that kind of thing. Other kinds of tools, you might have a frequently answered questions section about something, some topic that has to do with your website. Navigation is a key and important part of your website, and every website is going to have some. That's usually the bar that's at the top, and it's kind of your way of looking at the website. It's how you've organized it mentally in a hierarchical fashion. And you get to set, what you think are the key and important parts of your website, and then they kind of dig down into your website through the navigation bar. You might also have restricted content. So for example, if you have a members only section, if you're a nonprofit organization, say, you might have tools and documents and things that you only want your members to see and nobody else. So you would have a restricted areas section. Also, sometimes people will do this to sell additional content. Say you're a book author and you have a series out and you have a short story that comes in between a couple of books. You might want to let your audience have that. You might want to let, your avid fans have access to that, but not necessarily the entire world. And so you can have a restricted area wherein your audience give you something like their email address, and you give them access to additional content. So parts of a website: informational, maps, locations, hours, biographies, maybe a mission statement, maybe a contact form. That's the kind of thing you'll see in the information section. Your blog, we talked about what a blog kind of looks like. There's lots of different forms, different layouts for a blog. You might have a series of cards, kind of like these top two. They might appear in a list like this. Or if you're really, really visual, you might just have a suite of pictures that each one is associated with a particular blog post. Yeah.
Is it possible to get slides for members? Because I can't write all the information down, but having access to the slides like in a PowerPoint later on. Sure. This is Keynote. This is Keynote, and I think I can export it as a document of some sort. I'll see if I can create a PDF out of it.
If you want to, we can make that available to members only on our members only portion of the website.
Perfect.
So I've got your PowerPoint, so didn't you give it to me? No, you didn't. Never mind.
It's a Keynote.
So just send me the PDF and we'll upload it. Thanks.
Absolutely. Okay, so an educational section, which I think is a really nice thing to have on your website. That's kind of part of the tools, what I think of as the tools section. You might have a frequently asked questions section, videos in terms of a how-to, like if you want a recipes website, it's really nice to actually see somebody building the cupcakes or whatever. And I'm going to make the case for all you guys who are authors out here that on your website, you ought to, if you do a series, have a page that tells people what order to read the books in. Please. It is so hard to find that information like at Amazon. And if you have something like this and people go searching for it, it's been indexed, that'll bring them to your website and boom, you've got them, you've got their attention. Sales platforms. You can have a full-blown sales platform as part of your website. It can be as simple as a donate button that you might have if you have like a nonprofit organization, on up to a fully blown, I have products that have variants and styles and colors and sizes, and I can do international shipping and all of that sort of stuff. And it can all be brought into your website pretty easily with additional add-on functionality. Okay, and I will make the case that if you have anything visual going on in your website whatsoever, you should have a portfolio someplace. If this is just a gallery of pictures, the reason being is because people like to put things up on Pinterest a lot and Instagram, and getting that kind of organic traffic between you and other places of interest is really important. So yeah, even if all you want to do is like take a series of your book covers and just create a montage of them, that's a nice thing for people to see, and it'll get pinned. And members only website section, you're going to have kind of, I only put 2 things up here, but you really should have 3. At a minimum, you're going to have someplace where they can sign up, someplace where they can log in, and then the actual content once they're logged in. Okay, so we've been talking about what the structure of your website is. How about each individual page? What's going on a web page? And gee, this is the Southwest Writers page. So what we've got going here is we've got a header and a footer, and in the central part of it is the content area. And then here's this navigation bar that we talked about that basically gives the structure of how the people building this website are thinking about you moving around in the website. And then along the sides, we have what we call widgets. We call them widgets in the WordPress world. Other content management systems call them different things. But those are actually just little bits of functionality that is brought in to do a specific purpose. Like you might have a shopping cart along the side if you're doing e-commerce. You might have a list of recent posts. You might have a search bar, something like that. And yeah.
What's the difference? Is there any difference between post and blog?
A blog is made up of posts. A post is an individual article.
There you go.
We have a question on Zoom. MT is asking, do the images that we put up on our websites have to be original? Where do we find free use images, and how do we know they are free use?
Right, that's actually a super good question, because you do really want to make sure that the images that you're using are in the public domain if they're not content that you created yourself. I like pixabay.com. Pixabay is a great place for picking up free imagery. Pixabay, Pixabay.com. Also, I just recently heard that WordPress itself has created a subsection of public domain related imagery that's available. I don't have that URL right off the top of my head, but when I send Rose the keynote presentation, I'll go ahead and send her that URL as well. In fact, of the things that I mentioned, there's a couple of other places that you could pick up public domain imagery, and I'll send that to her as well to post. Okay. And I'm glad you're asking about images, because images are super important. I know you're all writers and words are really important to you, but these days you've got to have something that visually grabs somebody's attention immediately. So with every post that you create, I recommend that you have at least a featured image to go along with it. And it can be anything as simple as just your book cover, if you're talking about a book, or some scene that you kind of envision, or just something that kind of feels reminiscent of what you're talking about. If you're talking about something soothing and calming, maybe just have a picture of the ocean, just because. But visual is really super important, because when people see an entire page of nothing but text, their eyes glaze over and they just move on. It is sad, but it is true. Okay, now we're going to talk about one of the key things that's, if you take away nothing else from my talk today, this is really, really important. I know you all probably understand how to do print layout really well. moving into website layout is not the same as doing print layout. Some of the things that you know about print layout will serve you well, but print is for a particular size. Now, if you're doing a newsletter, you got 8.5 by 11 to work with. You don't really need to worry about things moving around on you, right? They're just going to be there. But for the web, you have no idea who is going to be consuming your web pages, and you don't know how they're going to be consuming them. They may have a laptop like I have. They may have a desktop. They may have an old XP Windows machine with a 10-inch monitor and 512 resolution, or they may have a gigantic 30-inch. They may be consuming it on the phone. Lots of people are consuming it on the phone and tablets. So you have no idea exactly what things are going to look like. And so we get to the topic of responsive layout. I'm going to show you a website here if it loads. Hopefully it will load here in a minute. There we go. Okay. So here's a lovely website. I like cats. So cats are always prominent in any of my demos. And what you've got here is this is WordPress website. It's got a theme that has an area for my featured posts, things that I think are important up at the top. It's got a navigation bar over here. It's actually got another navigation bar over here, which is basically the same thing in this particular website. It's got a couple of widget areas, and this is the main text. I can show you what the blog looks like, although I don't like the blog layout on this particular theme. Yeah, this particular theme lays out the blog. It lays out too much information, in my opinion. I think it should be more of a summary. If we have time, I'll log in and show you a better theme for that. Yes.
Since speaking of cats, that little tiger cub was found. If you did, would that be a post on your website about the little tiger cub, or would that be like a blog?
Well, it would be a post, which would be part of my blog.
Blog is for and I just learned that. Your blog is what you call all of the posts together.
Right. So like if you can think of your blog as like the front page of a newspaper. It's all the kind of summaries of the articles. And then when you dig down and look at a particular article, that is a post. So here we are, and let me see if I can, Zoom is always fun. I want you to watch what happens to this website as I resize it. So now this is kind of tablet sized, right? And we still have this blog, but all that stuff was on the left-hand side went away, and my featured images are kind of up here at the top, laid out in a 4x4. This guy is here. All this stuff now is down at the bottom. Okay, that's interesting. And if I resize it even further, now we're looking at what it would look like on a phone. And what you're seeing is, now all these blocks are kind of stacked up. Right. And my navigation has gone down here at the bottom. And even more important and kind of interesting is my navigation has collapsed itself into this thing, which is commonly referred to as a hamburger menu. I guess it's supposed to look like a hamburger. I'm not really sure why. But this is because on a phone, if I tried to display all of that stuff across the top, it would just be impossible to read. So this is responsive design. And you'll see that if you click on the hamburger menu, then you get your navigation. And that's interesting. And so you may think, okay, well, all I need to know is I need to design for, a tablet, a phone, and maybe a desktop. That's it. Don't need to worry about anything else. The truth is, that's just the very beginning, because not only do you need to navigate for the different sizes of devices, but you have no way of knowing how the person at the other end is going to be interacting with their computer. If they have bad website, the first thing they're going to do is this, right? So they can read it. Right. So you need to make sure that your tools are adaptive. You need to kind of check how your website is looking on as many in different platforms as you can. And it doesn't hurt to kind of, just see what would happen if you were blind as a bat and needed to move things up. Also, screen readers. Some people are actually interacting with the web without any kind of visual at all. They're having read to them. And you need to think about, as you're moving through designing your website, how was that experience for them? Another thing that you will find is sometimes people hate your choice of fonts, and they will simply replace your choice of fonts. Because in your web browser, you can set the font to be whatever you want it to be. So when you're making choices, when you're making your graphical choices, your typography and whatnot, kind of keep in the back of your mind, yeah, I want this to look really gorgeous. I want this to look really pretty, but don't spend a huge amount of time sweating it, because people may not be interacting with your website in the way that you think they are. Okay. The most important thing is the functionality. Make sure that you have the content that you want. Make sure that people can move around and find the stuff that they want within your website. Make sure it's meeting the needs of your audience. That is the most important thing. So that's kind of my plea for don't sweat it too much.
People are changing the fonts and that. It just says it on there, so not on your.
That is absolutely correct. This is only about how your end user is interacting with your website. If they have a phone, it's going to look different than if they have a gigantic 4K monitor display. And you just kind of have to have that in the back of your head. So, I mean, one of the things that this says to you is, well, website design has gotten pretty complicated, huh? It really kind of has. So it is nice if you have some tools. And so over the last 10, 15 years, web developers have been developing a lot of different tools. And there's kind of two different ways that they go. One way is frameworks, and those are tools that people who write websites and develop website applications use to bring in a lot of the libraries and things to make their life easier for coding a website. And that's fine if you're a programmer, but for lay people who really don't want to learn the ins and outs of HTML and JavaScript and CSS, there are things called content management systems. And content management systems, CMSs, are an application that splits the look and feel from the content. And it makes adding content easy for somebody who doesn't know anything necessarily about how HTML works. So things like WordPress and Joomla and Drupal, those are all content management systems. And a content management system runs in the web. You access it through your web browser, and it allows you to add content and make changes and updates to the content that exists without having to know much about what's actually going on with the structure. Somebody else develops the theme or the look and feel, and you can interact with that. And more these days, you interact with it more and more. In my class, we'll be talking exactly about the evolution of how WordPress started out looking like an editor that looks like Word. And these days it looks considerably more like an editor that's made up of Legos that you put together, blocks. But in any case, it's easier than building it yourself. Trust me, way easier than building it yourself. So why would you want to use a CMS? Well, I think we've covered that it's difficult to do it from the ground up. But a couple of other advantages are you get a consistent look and feel from page to page, and that's really nice for your branding. You kind of want all your pages to feel like they all belong like the same thing. Back in the 90s when people did websites, Oh, let's see, what are people saying in chat?
We changed default speaker.
So is your speaker all the way?
People out in Zoom land, can you hear her?
Audio is back.
Is audio back? Okay. Oh, we have some questions. I have not been watching chat. I keep forgetting that, usually when I do this, I have somebody who sits at the side and they watch chat for me. And I completely forgot to ask.
Let's start
Not
doing
your
that.
fault, let me.
No, it was my fault to not say. Oh, there's a couple of other people here who've mentioned some other, I think these are, public domain image sites. Highpals.com, don't know that one.
Which one?
Highpals.com?
And if you like, we can do Q&A at the end.
Yeah, we can, yeah, why don't we do that? That probably makes total sense. I get distracted pretty easily. You probably noticed. So let's see, we're talking about why do you want to use a content management system? Consistency, being able to add content easily, being able to add additional functionality and do that incrementally. So if you're working with a content management system, something like WordPress, you might start out working on a website and it's just a super simple site, like just a brochure site. It's got your name and maybe some information about who you are, maybe a list of your books, something like that, and that's it. And then over time, you find that actually what you'd like to do is maybe have a whole forum where you and and your audience have an interaction, have a conversation. It's easy to add a drop-in forum. It's easy to add an e-commerce solution if you decide you want to sell digital books on your website. It's easy to hook up with Facebook and have a Facebook feed that's running along the side of your website if for some reason that makes sense. So there's lots of a content management system. It makes it super flexible to add things later on as time goes on.
So is it free or is it like a subscription you have to pay?
WordPress is a free. It's a free piece of software. There are plugins that are free that you can add onto your website, and there's also things that you can purchase. Themes which give the look and feel. There are 3 free themes out there, but there are also ones that you can pay. And often what you'll get is you'll start with a free theme, and there'll be an upgrade to Pro. And usually the way that works is that's a yearly subscription fee. So you can absolutely 100% start out free. In terms of the software, you're going to need to have a hosting company, and that will be something that you have to purchase. So web hosting will always cost you money. Well, I guess WordPress.com has the ability to host free. If you don't want to have your own domain name, you can host free on WordPress.com. So you could get started playing around with WordPress. Free if you wanted to. Okay, why WordPress? Since we're talking about WordPress, why WordPress? When I first started doing these talks, when I would put up a slide that was similar to this, 18% of the internet's websites were WordPress. I looked this up just before I did this presentation, and it's up to 42% of the websites on the internet are running WordPress. So it has a lot of fans. And part of why it has a lot of fans is because there is a huge development community of third-party people who add plugins. There's also a huge community worldwide that get together and work together and help one another with WordPress. So the meetups that we were talking about earlier that I have over in Ideas and Coffee, which is a co-working space, those are free. Those are totally free. We do them once a month. We'll just help you out as a way of giving back to the community, which has given us a lot. There are, there are things called WordCamps, which are basically conferences that are dedicated to WordPress. And you can go to a conference for very inexpensive. They're all across the United States and in Europe and other countries as well. And they run the gamut in terms of levels. They'll have presentations for beginners on up to developers, how to write a plugin. So there's a big, healthy community for WordPress. And if you decide that you don't want to build a WordPress website yourself, there are a lot of people out there that will build WordPress websites for you that are that work in that industry. And one of the nice things is if you get a web developer that you don't like, you can always get somebody else to take over, because WordPress is that kind of ubiquitous. Oh, and the last, and I think probably the most important thing about WordPress is it's really easy to update and to keep current. And the reason why you need to do that is from a security standpoint. There are people out there who just seem to delight in trying to hack people's websites for no particular good reason. And there are people out there that hack websites for monetary reasons. If you can get control of somebody's website, then you can use it to send spam. And that's not a whole lot of fun to have to clean up. So keeping your website up to date and keeping your website current is super important. So WordPress makes that easy. When I first went with a content management system, I started out with Joomla. And I liked Joomla reasonably well. It was not bad. Came to a point when I needed to update to the next major release, and I was going to have to completely rebuild the website from the ground up to do that, because the new version was that kind of different. WordPress never does that to you. They just simply never shoot you in the foot in that way. So I changed to WordPress, and I've been with WordPress ever since. That's why I like WordPress. So let's talk a little bit about what kind of skills that you need to build a website. You need to know what you're trying to accomplish. You need to know what your goals are. And whether you do it yourself or hire somebody to do it, you need to know. That's important. You need to know your audience. You need to know how you want to reach them, what kind of conversations you want to have with them, whether you just want to talk at them, whether you actually want to engage them in a conversation. And you can do either of those things, and it's fairly straightforward. It helps if you have a good sense of design. You'll get a lot of the design from the theme, which is the look and feel part of your website. But there's a lot that you can do inside the content area, and even more so these days than there used to be. So knowing how things balance out and what colors go well with other things is a nice thing to have in your back pocket. You need to be patient. I tell you this because the things that seem like they are the simplest you'll be pulling your hair out over. Things which just seem like they're going to be super complicated. You grab a plugin, boom, and it just works. But there's this little thing, you want to move that from there to there. Oh my God, it takes you hours to figure out sometimes. So you need to know that while WordPress is probably the simplest website building tool out there, at least ones that are in the public domain, you still there still will be a ramp up. You'll still need to learn it a little bit. And that's where the community comes in, where if you can have other people that you can talk to and answer questions for you, you're gonna appreciate them. You also need the ability to compromise. So I showed you the vast difference of how people might consume your website from iPhone on up to desktop machine. Sometimes you get a notion in your head and you really want a red box to be up on the right-hand corner. No, give that up. That is hard because it is never going to look the same everywhere. But if you kind of have in the back of your head, let me see what's out there and what's available. What have designers done? What can I run with? Let me grab a few themes. Let me kind of try them out. Let me play with them. You might find that the end result is really super successful. and you have fun doing it. A lot more fun than maybe trying to dictate exactly what you think it wants to look like. Yeah.
Does WordPress have templates?
It has things called themes, which act as templates.
Okay.
That's what gives you the look and feel. That's where you get your topography, your layout, your color palette, all of that. And the ability to research problems, knowing how to Google. That's really helpful. There is a lot of material out there. And I do encourage you, if you want to do this yourself, if you don't take a class with me, do take a class with somebody, because WordPress is kind of in a state of flux at the moment. And you want to make sure that you're looking at the most recent kind of things that are going on with WordPress. And if you have a good grounding in what core WordPress can do, then it's easier to evaluate the advice that you're being given. Because sometimes somebody will tell you something about how to do a thing, and it's 10 years old, and that just isn't the WordPress way anymore, unfortunately. I mean, software moves on over time. So it is a thing that you will have to keep up with a bit. I mean, if you're going to do it yourself, it is an educational process, but you'll figure that out as time goes on. And it is really a whole lot of fun to build websites. Pick the right tool for the job. I personally think it's WordPress. So I'm going to be teaching a class in the next 3 weeks, and I guess that's going to be 6 hours total of class material. We'll be looking at how to configure WordPress installation, how to set up the time zones and names and all that stuff, whether or not you want a blog on your homepage or you want a static homepage, what the difference is between pages and posts, metadata and how you put it into your website, or SEO. SEO is search engine optimization. That's how the search engines find you. So what can you do to make your website be prominent in the area that you're designing a website for? Navigation, how to build menus, how to create content. We'll be talking about the old style editor versus block editor, and we'll also be talking about page builders. All of that will make more sense when I start talking about it. Styling your theme. There's the customizer and theme options, CSS. We'll talk about plugins, widgets, shortcodes, and blocks. That is all a way of adding additional functionality to your website as you build it out. We'll be talking about SEO, and we'll build a brochure site. We'll set up some events to show you how event-driven things might look. We'll look at a bit at SEO, and if time permitting, maybe we'll create a small e-commerce website. So I am at the questions portion of the presentation.